Great. So thank you all for coming. My name's Allison Torpy. I'm the managing director of Propeller Denver. We're here today to talk about retail trends and insights with three amazing women leaders across the retail space. So I'll just kick us off really quickly. So first, I think you would have seen as you're joining, but the session will be recorded. So I hope that's okay with everyone. Just click the little accept as you're coming in. We'll start with a little bit of an introduction, a little bit about Propeller, a little bit about our facilitators, and then of course also our panelists. And then we'll dive into the panel questions. We've got just some really high level questions, and we really are just kind of curious to see where the conversation goes. Feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat. We will have Shanna Grove from Propeller will be moderating the panel and kind of asking the panelists questions or clarifying questions. The panelists we're hoping will engage with each other throughout the conversation. But as you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll be moderating the chat and either raising questions along the way if it feels relevant in the moment. Otherwise, we'll save questions to the end, again, depending on the question. So great. Next slide, please. So cool. So our three panelists are, and I'll give each of them a second to introduce themselves as we get into the first question. So I'll just do a super high level intro here, but we're really pleased, like I said, to have three fantastic women leaders across the retail space. Deb White from Peloton, Senior Director of Global Learning and Development. Michelle Taylor from Nike, Senior Director, Strategic Enterprise Capabilities PMO. Nike likes long titles, I think. And then Megan Zielinski from Crocs, Director of Global Planning. You've already virtually met me, a Managing Director of the Denver office of Propeller. And then Shanna Grove is a retail expert and consultant from Propeller, who again will be moderating the panel conversation. So just a tiny bit about Propeller before we get going. Propeller just celebrated our 10th anniversary last month. So founded in 2012, based in Portland, Oregon. Two of our panelists are in Portland. I'm based in Denver. Megan is also based in Denver. So we have actually 6 offices now across the country: Portland, Denver, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Dallas, and Minneapolis. We have over 200 employees across those 6 offices. And we primarily do sort of local for local work, so a local focus. Of course, with the pandemic and things being virtual, that's changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but that's been sort of our primary focus over the last 10 years since we've been in business. In terms of our values, just really kind of quick snippets. We're industry agnostic, so of course we're here today to talk about retail, and that is a lot of the work that we do, but that's not all of the work that we do. We work across a variety of industries. We're also employee owned, which is a really neat structure for our Propeller community to help our employees act like owners. It's called an ESOP company. It stands for Employee Stock Ownership Program. And then, kind of going back to the local for local sort of model, we're very deeply engaged in our communities, whether it's, working for local clients or our local community service teams, which we call it Uplift, is our community service initiative. But we try to spend a lot of time engaged in our local communities from a social perspective, community service perspective, client perspective, and all of those great things. So with that, in the next slide, we're going to just pop up really quickly what are the 3 main kind of questions that we'll be hoping to get after. And like I said, Shanna's going to take it from here and kind of start with these higher level questions, but we're hoping for a pretty interesting and meaty conversation that results in, again, just using these questions as seeders for thought.
All right, thank you, Allison. Yeah, let's get started, everyone. Excited to get going. So to our panelists, what is one of the biggest challenges you've encountered in the last couple of years? And Deb White, you're at the top left of my screen, so I'll call on you first, and we can kind of popcorn around.
Sure, and I'll just do a little further intro. So Deb White, I use she, her pronouns. I've been at Peloton for a year and a half, and I have around 30 years of experience in the retail space. I've worked at Nike prior to Peloton and Williams-Sonoma Incorporated prior to that, with much of my time being in field leadership, and then flipping to the learning and development space and supporting retail for much of my last 16 years in L&D. So back to the question, I think the pace of change and how many times we've had to pivot and then pivot back to what we were doing before has been one of the greatest challenges that we've faced. And some things that, come to mind in helping teams through that and helping your customers through that is that really supporting your team with proactive communication and really supportive tools, thinking about what your team members or employees are going through every time we pivot, and that feeling of whiplash and uncertainty about their job. I really believe that when you take great care of your people, they will take great care of your customers. So I tend to always think first of the team and what their needs are. And when they get last minute communication and last minute notifications of a change, it can be really difficult for them to deliver on the expectations we have of them. And then in turn, also figuring out how do we effectively market to and communicate with customers so that they're also certain of what's going to happen when they come in their shopping experience. Things have certainly started to settle down, since those really volatile times during the peak of COVID, but I do still feel like there's a level of uncertainty when you're going shopping, because people haven't been doing it as frequently as they were before. So I think just really thinking through the experience for both your employees and your customer, and being proactive, communicating and marketing, what to expect to them.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Deb. And then we'll move on to you, Michelle Taylor. Please hop in.
All right. My name is Michelle Taylor. I work at Nike as the Strategic Enterprise Capabilities PMO Senior Director. I've been with Nike 4 years, and originally, so for the last 3.5 years, I was working in the global operations and logistics space. And which is part of what were the challenges of the last couple of years. Prior to Nike, I worked at REI for about 3 years, and before that, Nordstrom for 20 years in various merchandising and supply chain technology roles. So with the exception of, I don't know if anybody went to my LinkedIn, but with the exception of a very brief stint on Maui as a guest relations manager at a 5-star hotel, my whole career has been in retail technology, and I love it. And when I went on my brief stint to Maui, I left because I just really felt like I needed a break, and then very, very quickly realized how much I love this work and how excited I was to come back. So that is me. Regarding challenges, so having worked in the global operations and logistics space, there were a lot of challenges that we faced. And first and right, there were factory shutdowns, there were DC shutdowns, stores were shut down. The good news is that we had already started on a consumer direct offense and consumer direct acceleration, Nike had. And so really trying to shift our business model from being more wholesale focused to being direct to customer focus. And this really accelerated that. And so, everybody was going online, and it was this huge acceleration. And so what are the pivots that we need to make? Specifically with the supply chain in order to be successful there. So as a PMO leader, for me, that was really, and for my team, it was really around how do we, like Deb said, pivot, and how do we prioritize what is the most critical work in the moment to make sure that we're addressing them. So we had a lot of tiger teams that were getting after, really specific things like container shortages, and how do we provide insights to, to various things. Where is our inventory located? Reassessing demand. So a lot of work in that space. Another kind of challenge, obviously working remotely. That being said, the team that I worked on before and the team that I work on now, we're working on implementing a new ERP system. And our first implementation, which just happened on July 4th, was in Greater China. And Greater China was about 2 months ahead of us in terms of the trajectory of the pandemic. And so our partners in China were already working remotely. And, I remember, feeling so terrible for them and, how scary for you. And then it's just slowly rolling our way. But one of the things that our team did was, just in case, let's do some practice work remotely days to see how that felt. And honestly, I feel like that was really a smart and successful thing to do. So when it came time for us to shut down and stay home, for as long as we did, we had done some dry runs to make sure that we felt like we could operate that way. So that's it.
That's so good to hear. It's always nice to see your preparation, hard work pay off in that sense. So that must have been very gratifying.
Yeah.
All right, Megan Zielinski, please, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Zielinski. I am the Director of Global Planning at Crocs. I have been at Crocs for the last 9 years, mainly in the merchandising and planning space. And prior to that, I worked at Target. So I spent my entire 15 years in the retail space. And as I was telling these guys yesterday, it's in my blood. My family is also all involved in it. So it's something that I really care deeply about. So Deb and Michelle really hit on a lot of the stuff that I would also agree with. I mean, I would say the last few years that most of us have lived through have been unprecedented times, and in more ways than one, right? From everyone staying at home to retail stores closing, to how we adapt our supply chain, to where is our customers actually even buying our product. So it's been very interesting to see because obviously the companies that have been able to adapt quickly have been the ones that have won over the last few years. So one thing, for example, that Crocs did specifically that hopefully most people on this call remember is the free pair for healthcare program right when the pandemic hit. So I believe, the ones that really focus on the consumer engagement and are able to adapt to the situation quickly are the ones that really have overcome the challenges of the pandemic and leading into post-pandemic life.
Oh, great. Thank you for sharing. And it's so good to hear that we have a great variety of levers that you three have pulled during these challenges, because yes, to Deb's point, it does feel like we've been getting whiplash the last few years. So just knowing that you do have those levers to pull, such as switching up your methods to D2C, leaning more heavily into that strategy, or Megan, leaning into just how you can give back to the community, like things like that are so good to see that those have worked out well and that could be learnings for the future. All right, so if we're ready for our next question, what have you learned as a result of the challenges that you mentioned, and how have you been responding to those? And we can start from the, oh no, go ahead, Michelle.
I think, I learned a lot professionally and personally. And one of the things that really sticks out to me is like how resilient the teams were. I feel like I'm getting kind of emotional. It was really incredible to see teams just pull together and figure things out and support each other. And I think Nike, I was very impressed by their, and I'm sure like Peloton, Crocs, like, doing things for the community, taking care of their teams. We had salary continuance for the folks in our stores and the folks in our DCs. And it's really like understanding that it is your people that makes you go is really amazing. So I felt very, very proud to be working for Nike during this time. And so I think, and really the other thing is just from a personal and professional level is on what are the things that are important to me. This really was like such a shift, and I think I've always had a difficult time turning work off, and really had to be more conscious about that once everybody was working from home all the time. And so then it made me start to think about, so the time that I'm spending away from work, how am I spending that? The time that I'm spending at work, how am I spending that? What are the things that truly bring me joy in like professionally, and really focus on those things and move in that direction. And just extreme gratitude for family, friends, team, just really leaving that time with a very strong feeling of gratitude for everything I have and all the people around me.
And that actually kind of leads into something that we were discussing just yesterday, I think, Michelle. You had mentioned that Nike recently implemented a wellness week, I believe. Was that in response to the pandemic? And do you see that that's how you're continuing to kind of build on that?
Yeah, yes. So last year was the first year that we did a wellness week, and it was, and we just had our wellness week this year, last week. And so we shut down campus for the week for people to get rest and recovery. And we have sort of like a dim the lights during the holiday season, but people are still working during that time. This was for the most part, if you don't have to work, you're not working. You do not have to take PTO. You're just resting and recovering. And then because everybody is doing it, you're not coming back to a pile of email. People aren't reaching out to you while you're gone. It truly was this respite that all of us, I think, really needed. And I definitely believe that it stemmed from COVID. I'm not sure I don't remember if that's how John Donahoe communicated it last year. I do think that it was a big thank you for everybody working so hard and keeping things afloat. And there's no, I don't know that it's a, built in and guaranteed that this is what we're doing going forward, but it certainly looks like it's trending that direction. And I think the goodwill that it has on the people is well worth it.
That's really great to hear, Michelle, because again, I think to echo some of the things you've said, some of the things that I've learned over the last year and 2 years now, is really prioritizing and understanding what's important, not just in business, but also in my personal life, as you spoke to. But then I think the other thing that has really come to fruition is, although I mentioned before, we're in unprecedented times. Unprecedented times are the new normal. If it's not a global pandemic, it's the Suez Canal being blocked. If it's not the Suez Canal being blocked, it's inflation. There's, I think that what has constantly come to mind is, although retail is a constantly fast moving paced industry, which is why most of you are probably involved in it. And it's super exciting. We're at the point now where I feel like it's moving at lightning speed, and you definitely need to keep up.
Yeah, Megan, I would totally agree. We're kind of in a constant state of sustained intensity. And we're always ready, right, for what's going to change next. So you can try to get in front of being so surprised all the time. But I think what I would add, and I totally concur with what Michelle and Megan shared, is that I think that all of this change has driven the need for creativity and invention. Necessity drives invention. And when you're constantly faced with a new condition and a new challenge, then you have to move into that, creativity mode. So I do think a lot of really great things have come out of the last couple of years. And I feel like that's become a bit of a new normal, to be in more of the, discover what the sentiment is from your customers, from your employees, and then go into test and learn a lot to see, well, will this work? Will this work? We have to give, customers a reason to stay with your brand, and then give your employees a reason to stay with you, and make them happy. I think like the Wellness Week at Nike is it's a great selling point that, they really care about, my wellness. I feel like we've done that from the get-go at Peloton. It's a wellness company. And that's both an internal cultural thing, and, it's for our members as well. But one thing that really, I think was a great reaction to what we were dealing with over the last couple of years, when we suddenly shut down in March and everybody did go remote. That included like our instructors. So our instructors could no longer film in the studios. And within 1 week, they did shipping of equipment, cameras, all the things that you need to film at home. And all of them were up and filming at home, so that our members didn't have to go without their classes and taking care of themselves. And that would have never happened. And then now that's something that, now that the studios are open, our members are like, don't take away the, the classes that we have where they're just doing it by themselves, because we really like that. And we would have never discovered that. So there's just, so many things like that that came out of the creativity of needing to solve for a problem quickly, that were actually a really good direction to go. And I think that's also applies to our team members, our employees as well. So we had to do different things for them as well during the pandemic that now have stuck. A more hybrid working model for corporate employees, addressing things like Zoom fatigue, but with the Wellness Week, or at Peloton, we don't have meetings on Fridays, things like that to work differently. And I actually think it's good. And the other thing that I think about is to keep your customers engaged, there really has to be these cultural and community components, because I think people are really craving a lot of that. They're craving community and craving cultural connection. And so I think that's a really fun space to play in. At Peloton, we do a lot of fun things like homecoming and All for One music festival, and things that bring common, things that you have in common together as a community. And there's just like unlimited potential when you think in that space. So some good stuff is coming out of this, I think.
Oh, that's so excellent to hear and encouraging. It does make me wonder though, ladies, do you think that some of these challenges are unique to your business or maybe your sector of retail, or do you think that they're largely shared across the entire retail environment?
I personally think they're largely shared across the retail environment. How each company addresses it though may be different based off of their product offering or their services. Or for example, again, like going back to things like inflation right now, if I was in a non-discretionary business, I'd probably be dealing with that a lot differently than, how we're looking at it as a shoe brand, things along those lines.
Absolutely makes sense, especially with the longer lead times around shoes. A t-shirt is a much faster turn. You can pivot on your feet a lot more quickly versus the longer lead times do make things a little more challenging.
Yeah, and I would agree with Megan. I think people crave connection and they want to connect with people. They want to connect with brands, connect with music, whatever it is. So I feel like it's pervasive, but to your point, Megan, it's going to be addressed differently by every sector.
All right, and now on to my favorite question. Looking forward off into the future, what do you anticipate being the next big challenge coming up, and how are you preparing for that?
I think I cannot predict what the next big challenge is. I love what you said, Megan, or I think it was Megan, but it's just like, we're in unprecedented times. Things are coming at us from every different direction, right? And so I think the ability to be nimble is super critical. And so in my space, what that looks like is we're in the process of implementing this ERP system. So enterprise planning. Oh my gosh, now I'm spacing on what ERP stands for. But we're implementing this ERP, which is the foundation for enterprise resource planning, which is the foundation for all of the systems that we use at Nike. So it is where transactional data is held. It is where HR data is held. It is where all of our master data is held. It's product data. And so we're in the process of upgrading this geography by geography. And part of the reason that we are doing that is so that we can pivot quickly from a technology perspective to address things as they change. When you have systems that are antiquated and aren't nimble, you're really in a position where you're having to spend a lot of time and money in order to pivot to what the customer needs. And so I think that's definitely what my team is focusing on. And then I really love what Deb said about creativity. I do think that that people are thinking about things differently, and I think that just opens up so many doors and gateways to how we can address future problems. And so it's kind of like we've all been practicing over the last couple of years, how to deal with things that come our way, and practice makes perfect. And so we'll just keep practicing and things will keep coming our way and we'll have the ability to, shift and adjust.
That's so interesting to hear, especially about the transformations that you're making on the technology side and how that can help contribute to the nimbleness of your business as well as the community. But I think it's so common throughout this industry for some leadership to kind of see a large transformation like the ERP transformation that you mentioned, because that is a massive undertaking. It's very time consuming, very expensive. So how do you go about weighing the pros and cons of that and making the decision to go down such a long path?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think that, so Nike has been on this journey for a little while now, and you can Google it and find out when things started and, where we've been. So I think that this program started probably 5-ish years ago. And we knew then that this needed to happen. I think we have multiple separate ERP systems in different geographies, and then sometimes within the geography, within territories, within the geography. And so if you have different systems, you do not have the ability to, apply a global standard, and in some cases, a global standard is not appropriate because there are different business models in different areas of the world. But so we knew 5 years ago that this needed to happen. And it's taking us a while to get here. We've really gained momentum and we're doing a great job. We just implemented, like I said, in Greater China in July, and are implementing our North America solution in next July. So I'm so grateful that the leaders saw that this needed to happen. I think part of it is that we had a new CDIO join Nike a few years ago, and he really saw kind of the writing on the wall that you need to have a really solid foundational platform to then build upon. And so that has really, helped us move in that direction. So yes, but it's long, it's arduous, it's, you don't always see, if you're used to working on agile technology programs, you're seeing something delivered every couple of weeks and you're seeing the fruits of your labor. With these long ERP implementations, sometimes it takes multiple years to see the fruits of your labor. And so that can be hard for leaders to understand, and hard for people who are doing the work to not see where it's going. And I'm really thankful that we have a technology leadership team and business that understands that that this is necessary and that it's worth the wait and worth the cost. It's expensive.
Oh gosh, thank you for the additional detail. I'm sure the other nerds in the room like me are just loving this.
And Shanna, I agree with Michelle that I don't know that we can predict, and I don't know that I want to predict what the next big challenge is going to be. But I do think that we are operating differently now. And I see this question in the chat, which is kind of where I want to go, is how do you keep that creative mindset going? How do you create the safe space, to have those kind of challenging conversations and challenge the way things are now and think about where the future's going? And collectively, like when you pull in groups, within an organization from different functions, and really allow a safe space for conversation about what could be, or what if we didn't have this, then you come up with fantastic ideas. So I know that this is something we do at Peloton, and when I was at Nike, we did that as well, kind of a hackathon kind of environment where you plan some events to bring people in with a whole lot of white space on the wall to just be creative, and no idea is a bad idea. And you really have a lot of fun with it and give people the platform to get their ideas out there. The more frequently that you can do things like that and kind of test the current norms before whatever societal impact tests those norms, then it creates a culture of innovation, and it creates a culture of feeling psychologically safe to be able to share your opinions, your ideas. And that actually can stimulate, whether your idea was the right one, it might stimulate a conversation that gets to a really great idea.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Deb. I think, if anything we've learned over the last few years, I feel like it's Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And as Deb said, I do not want to predict the next challenge because I'm sure it will change. But with that said, I think thinking about strategically, how do we think about our business differently? How are we going to be relevant in the next 3, 5, 10 years? And being able to have those conversations up front really allows us as a brand to really focus on what is the next thing and what do we want to tackle and how can we be creative. Again, we can't always predict everything, but I think taking strategic outlooks and taking the time as a team to really look at what things could be and what does innovation look like will allow many brands to stay more strategic, more agile, and more consumer focused so that we are constantly innovating and delivering what we need to for our consumers.
And Shanna, one thing I would add to this too is, and this is, one of those like act locally in order to start, making an impact more broadly. Every week I have on Friday morning something called office hours, which you've all heard of and maybe do. But those 2 hours, I just sit on the Zoom, sometimes by myself and nobody comes. Sometimes lots of people come, but it's a space for this. It's a space to just talk about ideas and what's broken, what's not feeling right, or what's feeling great and how do we keep it going. And ideas that are beyond my team of L&D, but what we can do to help the company be successful. And I find that, after a while, people really got used to this and they really love it and look forward to coming to that unplanned space that is just dedicated to conversation. Like we used to have in the office, if you ran into each other in the cafeteria or walking between buildings, and that doesn't happen as frequently anymore when some are in the office and some are remote. So opening up those spaces like that is a simple thing to do, but can feed the creativity.
That's a great point, actually. And do you find that helps to give your team a feeling of value as well? Because everyone definitely feels value when they're heard and they have that space to be creative and to put out their thoughts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when you feel heard, you feel valued. And so that's not only the space, but it's also the way that people treat one another and, not interrupting and paraphrasing and truly listening and showing that you're listening. Then people feel heard, they feel respected and valued.
I love that. I totally want to, I was going to say steal, but I'm going to borrow that from you. In my former team, we had one Friday a month, we had a how are you feeling really meeting scheduled that anybody could come to. And so it was focused on how are you feeling, which I feel like I need to implement one of those as well, but in my new team. But I love the idea of setting aside time for people to come and talk about, ideas they have, or, maybe roadblocks they have that they could use advice on or whatever. I think that is great. So I'm going to borrow that. I also at Nike, a lot of the technology teams reserve one sprint every quarter to be an innovation sprint. And sometimes you can't always honor it. But the leaders, most of the leaders I know, really try everything in their power to honor that innovation sprint. And really, really cool things have come out of it. And so, it's giving people a voice and space to, share their thoughts and, spitball, and it's super, and working remotely, it's hard to do that.
Great. Yeah, I think we've all struggled to kind of create the same virtual forums for things that used to be really are hard to do already in person, but just infinitely harder, it seems, to do them virtually. So I think it's always interesting to share ideas of what's worked and what hasn't, and steal, borrow, whatever you want to call it, Michelle, but share ideas. I think is really, really great. And yeah, so I'm just looking back at the comments. I know Selena wrote, love how the change and increase in need for agility has impacted your values and operations too. I think I've also noticed that kind of theme shine through where, it's really forced each of your organizations to kind of think back on like, what do we stand for? What do we care about? How do we want our employees to feel? Our employees and our customers to feel when they interact with the brand. And it's really clear that the three of you individually have put a lot of thought into that, as well as your organizations. So I think we're out of panel questions. Are there any other audience questions? Either pop them in the chat, or if someone, I hesitate to say come off mute, but maybe just pop them in the chat and then I can read. Unless any of the panelists have anything else you'd like to share, or while people are typing audience questions, we can do it both ways.
Yeah, Allison, I have one other thing on my mind, that it's not predicting a challenge. It's a challenge we face today that has kind of started to grow throughout the last couple of years. And that's the retention of our employees and that volatile kind of, marketplace when it comes to attrition. I mean, I think especially in the tech space, we're feeling a lot of that across the industry. But so I think, now more than ever, it's got to be a part of the strategic plan at the highest level to engage, the employees and make sure that their experience is as well thought through as it is for our customers. And so, really giving listening forums like we've been talking about, measuring engagement and truly digging in to figure out what's the root cause. Because, of my many years as a people leader, the same things tend, no matter what company I've been at or what company I'm reading about, the same issues bubble to the top of engagement, and they're still at the top, but they really need to be addressed. So when it comes to creativity, I think we need to put a lot of energy behind how do you truly engage your team, especially in a hybrid environment, and then really invest in them. The wellness things that we've been talking about throughout, but cultural events, and invest in them in their own individual development or team development is so critical right now. And it can't be, it can't be deprioritized. So that's the other thing that's just kind of weighing on me right now, is I'm really thinking heavily about future strategy and how do we really retain our team members and make them love what they're doing,
I couldn't agree more, Deb. I mean, I think everyone in the news has read about the Great Resignation and how that's impacted it, the entire retail sector, but everyone in general. And really caring about your employees, focusing on them, developing them is definitely where we need to continue to go as an industry.
Great.
Yeah,
we have an audience question from Annie. So you each have years of industry experience. She's curious, what is the one change or innovation you feel lucky to have witnessed in retail? And what is one thing you hope to witness before your career in retail ends? Great question, Annie. Thank you.
I feel like this is really going to date me. But so while I was at Nordstrom, one of the things that my team was involved in was inventory visibility across the entire, our entire supply chain. And I'm trying to think of our fancy name for it, but really, a million years ago, people would literally like hash mark, this is how many things we have in the store. And then like each store had its own version of what that inventory picture looked like. And then we ended up really having a very clear view into inventory disposition, where it is, having the ability to reserve some inventory, like for anniversary sale, things like this. And so, and I've been other places where that hasn't necessarily not necessarily completely implemented, not at Nike. And so it was really revolutionary to be a part of that. And again, that's absolutely dating me. But that was huge. And then like, this might be silly, but like buy online and pick up in store, just my goodness. And when I find a retailer who doesn't have that option, it is so frustrating. Or I went through a retailer the other day who had the ability, you could buy online, pick up in store, but they had to ship it to the store from the DC. No, I want it to be at the store right now. I need it right now. And so those to me are, advancements that I was excited to be a part of at Nordstrom. And then as far as, I don't know, this is maybe silly, but I think last mile, I feel like I am the nerdiest one on this call. Last mile distribution is really challenging. And, I wonder, is there a way where we could have drones deliver last mile or do something that alleviates that, reliance upon your big box last mile folks like UPS and FedEx? So I guess that's kind of my dream. Now, I don't necessarily want giant packages like flying around in the air, but like, is there some way that we can do that and not have it be an impact on the environment and not have it be an impact on humans who have to do that work?
I couldn't agree more, Michelle. Honestly, you kind of took my answer, at least from that second part of the question. Like, I'm really just curious what's going to happen next. Are we going to have self-driving cars delivering packages and drones and things along those lines? But I think in general, the thing that I've been most excited to see over my career is just the change to consumer focus. I mean, the fact that you can order something online and it could be at your doorstep within hours. And like, to think even 10 years ago of that being a possibility, it just blows my mind, some of the things that we've been able to do as a consumer brand, et cetera. But I am very curious what's going to happen next. And I feel like I can't say what I'm most excited for, because I feel like it's just going to be beyond our wildest dreams of what could happen.
And I think I would add, I'm totally with you on the buy online, pick up in store. But the thing that first came to my mind was when Starbucks created their app, and then you could make your order and then run in and pick it up at the counter. Like that, to me, that was like this paradigm shift of like, whoa, okay, we're in a whole new space now. And I can't imagine not having that service. But also, when I was at Williams-Sonoma Incorporated, and this was a long time ago, working in the Pottery Barn brands and with West Elm and Williams-Sonoma, I was a part of the team that created in-home consultations, in-home party planning, in-home cooking events, that we trained, teams to actually go in and be a designer and use it. And it was just, it created this like convenience and support that you need, like when you're like panicking because you're about to have a big party and you can't really afford to have a true event planner come in, but you could call Pottery Barn and have somebody come in and help you with everything you possibly needed. So that was a really exciting thing to be a part of, and now is a massive part of that company's business. And so it's like a bit of clienteling, but it was a very, very high touch personal experience. And when I think about the future, I think about, how do we, what are pain points for me, as a customer? And the two things that come up is when something goes wrong, so when you place an order, the thing you get isn't right, or you make a purchase and it's not functioning right, or doesn't fit right, or it's that end of it. Like, how can you get to a place where customer support, member support is such a easy, seamless, fast, such an experience that comes to resolution, and it's not something that you dread. And so I don't know what the answer to that is, but I hope we can solve for that. And it's not just like a company that solves it, but there's a solution that can be, leveraged by everyone to help people resolve issues at the end of their kind of purchase experience. And then the other thing I would think about is how retail can continue to have a massively positive impact on our planet, and sustainability. and bringing that to the forefront of how we do everything throughout the whole product life cycle. And so those are two things that I hope to see solved, in my, while I'm in this amazing business.
Great, thank you all. Lots of innovative ideas for the future, and crazy things that, I can't quite remember who said this anymore, but the things that we couldn't have even imagined 10 years ago being possible today. So the industry, we can see, is really changing quite quickly, and lots of really exciting things that have already happened, and I think maybe all of these things that we've laid out just now as future wishes will happen, absent the large boxes flying around in the air. So we'll try to be safe about it. Cool. Well, I'm gonna read, Kevin J has a question around data. So we haven't talked a lot about that yet. How are your companies using data to proactively assess burnout, retention rate, et cetera? It seems like those critical things aren't prioritized until there's a global pandemic. So how are we kind of trying to get in front of that stuff, I think, is the question.
I'll go. So Nike does an annual colleague engagement survey, and that is largely the data that we use to assess how things are going at a, from a micro to a macro level. And then each team is, responsible for putting together a plan to address those things. And then depending upon like how widespread this thing is, that kind of depends on how it's being addressed. Nerd alert. For my team last year, there were certain things, and this wasn't for my small team, but it was for my VP's larger team. And, I was sort of gutted to see that there were responses saying that they didn't feel like safe to be themselves at work. And that is what in the world. And so we had already formed this group called the Culture Club, which as a person who's almost 50, there's a band called the Culture Club. Some of you may not be aware of it. And so we jokingly named it that just to see who would get the joke. But so we created this Culture Club like 3 years ago. And then the Culture Club was sort of took on the ownership of taking these colleague engagement survey results and then creating a plan around them. And so my team also implemented OKRs, objectives and key results. And so we created OKRs around the things that we felt most, were needed addressing urgently. And that was one of them. And I'm really proud of the work that we did around that. And it's kind of funny that it was an OKR that got us there, but it really kept us on point in measuring the work that we were doing in the DE&I space, in the work that we were doing around individual development plans. I think that was the impetus for creating the, how are you doing really meetings. And then we did quarterly pulse checks afterwards to check in on those specific things that we were addressing and asked to be rated on those. And gave people an opportunity to have comments. Sometimes we asked if people, if they wanted to leave their name, we could interview them for more information. And so I'm really proud of that work that we did. And it's kind of, I chuckle a little bit that we used this really nerdy way to get after it. But it was very, very effective, and it held us accountable to the goals that we set. And I think that we were really thoughtful about how we, as a team, went after those things, really wanted to make sure that we were getting after the right things. And then our next colleague engagement survey results, like it was in amazing shape, and I felt really good about that.
And I'll add on to that, Michelle. We do the annual engagement survey as well at Peloton. We also do a mid-year. We kind of call it more of a vibe check, and it's an engagement survey that's focused, it's smaller, and it's focused on what we think might be really critical at the moment. So this year was on change. So the questions were really about change and, how people were dealing with change. And I think that targeted data on top of the overarching engagement survey is super helpful. to get focused on what we need to be focused on. So definitely agree with that. We also lean on our employee resource groups to get a pulse of, that's not hard data, but that more subjective data that we can get in inputs from the ERGs is really helpful to get a pulse of how, the broader team is doing.
100% agree. Again, we do something very similar here at Crocs, where we do surveys annually and then kind of mid-year check-ins. But I honestly think the subjective data, there's something to be said for one-on-one conversations and just leaving that door open for employees that report to you, and or having those conversations with your boss about how you're feeling and what you like and don't like and where things can go differently. With that said, it's something that at least I'm super passionate about, and always encourage people to go after of make sure that door is open, because we can have all the data in the world, but if you don't have a real conversation with people that report to you or your boss, then you're going to be unhappy. And it's one of those things where sometimes just being honest and having conversations up front can really open doors.
Great. All right. Well, it looks like Michelle's learned a lot of new tricks and terms today, so hopefully everyone else has as well. I think we're about ready to wrap up the conversation today. We're nearly at the top of the hour, so just wanted to share first of all, thank you, panelists, for sharing such helpful insights and your thoughts and experiences in the industry over the last couple of years. Thank you to the audience for your really interesting questions that sparked some really, really great conversation that I think we couldn't have thought of ourselves. And so we just wanted to close by saying, we'll be sharing some resources with the folks who joined the call. One is a blog that actually Annie, who posed one of the questions, wrote on the healthy tension model for retail demand planning success. So just some light reading for some of the other retail nerds in the group. And then another article on digital business ecosystems that, again, is hopefully helpful in insights and information for y'all. Just wanted to share some more of our thoughts. So again, thank you all so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful Wednesday evening, and yeah, thank you. Have a good day. Bye.